If you want to know how close you are to total psychological burnout, don't look at your calendar. Look at the monsters you ride in your
Yeah,
dreams.
that is such an important distinction to make right away. We often assume that bizarre, vivid dreams are just, the brain doing some random overnight housekeeping.
Right, like just clearing the cache or whatever. But when we actually apply a clinical lens to those narratives, a very, very different picture emerges.
Exactly. I mean, when a dream leaves a lingering, visceral sense of pain or fear upon waking, we are not looking at random neural firing.
It's something much deeper than that.
It is. In the realm of Freudian psychology, that kind of intense, lingering residue is evidence of a profound unconscious conflict. It's basically a distress beacon.
Like the conscious mind is just caught in a crossfire, right?
Yes, sir.
Between what society demands of it and what its own suppressed desires are, screaming for.
Precisely. It is a literal SOS signal from your own psyche.
And that SOS signal is our mission for this deep dive.
Hmm.
We are bypassing the usual surface level dream interpretations today.
Right. No dream dictionaries here.
Exactly. We are putting a highly detailed, deeply symbolic dream narrative under the microscope. We're going to decode how the unconscious mind uses terrifying imagery and even intense physical pain to force you to pay attention.
Because it will find a way to make you listen.
It absolutely will. So by walking through this specific multi-layered dream, which spirals from a really mundane real estate pitch all the way down into a violent dissociative video game, you will understand the underlying mechanics of how your own mind tries to warn you about waking life burnout.
It is a wild ride, this specific dream.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this. The narrative begins in this incredibly stifling environment. It's a forced real estate training presentation.
Right. Highly corporate, very rigid.
Yeah, and the dreamer is standing in front of a room being made to sell a house, but they have to use completely random, made-up numbers.
Which is incredibly frustrating just on the surface.
Oh, totally. And standing right next to them is this older colleague who is constantly pushing them to highlight the most mundane features imaginable. Like, the colleague keeps insisting, talk about the kitchen, talk about the toilet.
Of course. The purely functional rooms.
Right. But suddenly the dreamer just snaps. They rebel against the presentation and shout that they could speak passionately about their own life instead of this meaningless data.
Which is a huge moment.
Yeah.
Because to understand the mechanics here, we have to look at foundational dream symbolism.
Yeah.
A house in psychological analysis is, well, it's rarely just a piece of property.
It represents the person, doesn't it?
Exactly. It represents the self, the structural foundation of the dreamer's identity. So being forced to pitch that house to an audience is the unconscious mind processing the waking life pressure to prove one's value.
Within a super rigid societal framework.
Yes, exactly. The dreamer is quite literally putting their self on the market, subjecting their worth to external commercial valuation.
Wow, yeah. That maps perfectly onto how so many of us curate these hyper-polished, totally soulless LinkedIn personas just to survive corporate life.
Oh, absolutely. It's the exact same mechanism.
We're essentially forced to highlight our functional utility instead of who we actually are.
And that older colleague is the manifestation of that exact demand. In Freudian terms, this figure acts as a proxy for the internalized rules of society.
So that's why they want to focus on the toilet and the kitchen.
Precisely. The colleague demands a focus on those rooms because they are spaces of pure surface-level utility. Society often demands that we showcase how useful we are, how well we process and produce.
Right, rather than allowing us to express our deep, complex individuality. And I guess that the random numbers just emphasize the absurdity of all those corporate metrics.
They really do. It highlights how meaningless the expectations feel to the dreamer.
But looking at the dreamer's reaction, I mean, they don't just accept it. They shout out that they want to talk about their own life.
Which is a very aggressive pushback.
Yeah, so isn't that outburst a sign of a healthy, functioning ego actively resisting suppression rather than, a symptom of psychological dysfunction?
This raises an important question. The conscious resistance you were pointing out is indeed the first spark of the conflict.
Okay, so it is a healthy impulse.
It is. The ego, which is the part of the psyche responsible for mediating between our internal desires and external reality, is attempting to assert its boundaries. It is refusing to be reduced to mere plumbing and random numbers.
I love that. I will not be reduced to plumbing.
Right. But the complication arises because the ego's rebellion against the societal rules of that real estate pitch makes it impossible for the dreamer to remain in that shallow environment.
Oh, I see. Because you can't just rebel and then go back to the pit.
Exactly. The mind realizes that if the self is not this functional corporate product, It must figure out what the self actually is. And this triggers a plunge into a much deeper, older part of the psyche.
And that plunge takes us right into the second act of the dream, which has this incredibly eerie, just heavy atmosphere.
It's a very dramatic shift in tone.
It really is. The dreamer wanders away from the presentation and finds themselves in a dimly lit ancient art school.
Which is the classic representation of the unconscious.
Yeah, and the room is filled with creepy armor, intricate antiques, and massive classical paintings, but everything is covered in a thick layer of black soot.
The soot is such a vital detail here.
Right, and standing among all this neglected art is a witch-like old man. He leans in and whispers to the dreamer that modern art, which is bizarrely symbolized in the dream by a simple, mass-produced umbrella, completely lacks individuality and charm.
A mass-produced umbrella. That's a brilliant unconscious metaphor.
Yeah, and hearing this, the dreamer is hit with a crushing wave of inferiority. They look at all the complex classical art and feel completely empty, terrified that they lack the individuality required to stand alongside it.
Okay, so that descent into the soot-covered art classroom is a mechanical shift from the conscious ego down into the deep unconscious.
And you mentioned the soot being important.
Yes, the soot is the key variable here. It represents time, neglect, and repressed emotion. These antiques and paintings are the beautiful, complex, but completely ignored parts of the dreamer's true self.
Oh, wow. So they belong to the dreamer.
Exactly. They've been left in the dark, gathering dust, while the waking self was busy trying to survive the real estate pitches of modern life.
That is so tragic. And the old man feels like a very specific mechanism, too. I mean, he's judging the umbrella, which seems to represent that mass-produced functional identity from the first segment.
He operates as a classic psychological archetype. He blends the roles of the wise man and the harsh internal critic.
Ah, the inner critic. We all know that guy.
We certainly do. The old man voices a profound critique of the superficial modern world, the umbrella. But his presence immediately triggers the dreamer's deepest insecurities.
Because he's holding up this impossibly high standard of classical beauty.
Right. The critic forces the dreamer to measure their own internal worth. And because the dreamer has spent so much time operating as a functional, mass-produced entity in the waking world, they look at their own deep unconscious and mistakenly believe they are empty.
But there's a massive paradox built into that reaction, though.
How so?
Well, the dreamer is standing in the dark, agonizing over this feeling of emptiness, and deeply worried about which kind of earth they align with. But doesn't the very fact that they are feeling this crushing inferiority complex prove they possess a deeply sensitive, unique perspective?
That is a fascinating observation.
Like a genuinely empty, superficial person wouldn't care what the old man had to say, right? They just open the umbrella and leave.
That is the tragic irony of the modern neurotic condition. You are absolutely right. The capacity to recognize the overwhelming complexity of those antiques and the ability to feel the profound pain of falling short requires a deeply rich inner world.
So they already have what they're looking for.
The dreamer already possesses the complexity they are searching for. They simply haven't integrated it yet. The quiet despair of feeling ordinary while being surrounded by highly curated brilliance is an incredibly common mechanism of modern anxiety.
We perceive our own depths as covered in soot.
Yes, and we assume everyone else's depths are pristine masterpieces.
Man, that hits close to home. But the dreamer's nervous system clearly cannot handle that realization. The emotional weight of facing their perceived emptiness in that dark classroom becomes too much, so the brain shifts gears entirely.
It has to, or it will overload.
Exactly. It initiates a drastic psychological defense mechanism, moving the dream into a medium that feels inherently less real and therefore less threatening, which is a video game.
A brilliant modern defense mechanism.
Yeah, a bell rings, and the dreamer literally slides down an iron pole into this new digital reality. But the perspective shifts. They are no longer looking out of their own eyes. They are viewing themselves in the third person, like a camera floating behind a video game character.
And what does the character look like?
Well, their character is a tiny soldier wearing flimsy aluminum armor, riding on the back of a massive, terrifying dragon-scorpion hybrid.
Okay, the transition into the third-person camera angle is the literal visualization of dissociation.
Dissociation, like
Yeah.
separating yourself from reality.
Right, when emotional pain or the feeling of powerlessness threatens to overwhelm the ego, the mind detaches. It manufactures distance.
To make it safer to process.
Precisely. The neurological function of dissociation is to create a buffer zone, allowing the brain to process trauma by telling itself, This isn't happening to me. I am merely observing it happen to this avatar.
Wow. And the specific details of that avatar explain exactly how the dreamer views their waking self, right? Like the flimsy aluminum armor.
Yes, it is a defense that offers no actual protection. It signifies a profoundly fragile self-image, entirely exposed to the harsh elements of reality.
Here's where it gets really interesting because you have this tiny, incredibly fragile soldier wrapped in aluminum foil, but they are riding this monstrous, lethal dragon scorpion.
The contrast is extreme.
Yeah. So if the tiny soldier is the conscious ego trying to maintain control, that dragon has to represent a massive, suppressed, instinctual energy. It's like a psychological pressure cooker.
You've hit the nail on the head. That dragon represents the id.
The id, right? The primitive part of the brain.
In psychoanalytic theory, the id is the primitive, instinctual part of the mind that contains sexual and aggressive drives. It operates entirely on the pleasure principle, demanding immediate gratification.
So it's basically pure chaos.
Essentially, yes. The aggression that the dreamer was forced to suppress during the real estate pitch didn't just evaporate. When you suppress frustration for prolonged periods, it ferments into hostility. The dragon is that accumulated, raw, untamed rage.
And riding it sounds like a terrifying tightrope walk between absolute omnipotence, having the power to destroy everything in your path, and the constant paralyzing fear of being bucked off and consumed by your own anger.
It's a very precarious position.
It really mirrors a waking life where a person desperately wants to break free from societal rules, but is terrified of what their own rage might do if they let go of the reins.
Exactly. The mind fears its own capacity for destruction, which explains the profoundly dark turn the narrative takes while they are riding this creature.
Yeah, it gets really dark. The dreamer flies the dragon into a cave where they find a happy young couple. And without hesitation, the dreamer breathes fire on them, instantly turning the couple into literal chunks of meat.
It's a shocking escalation.
It is. And then, just like a video game looting mechanic, the dreamer collects an item from their remains called human powder.
While visually disturbing, this sequence makes perfect mechanical sense in the context of psychological defense mechanisms.
Really? How so?
Well, the cave is a universal archetype for a safe, private, enclosed space. The happy couple symbolizes intimacy, genuine human connection, and joy. The dreamer's decision to annihilate them is an execution of inverted jealousy.
Let's break down how inverted jealousy actually functions here, because it seems entirely counterintuitive to destroy the very thing you presumably want.
It does seem backward, but think about the pain of lacking it. When an individual desperately craves intimacy and connection, but feels utterly incapable of achieving it, perhaps due to that flimsy aluminum armor and the fear of lacking true individuality, the pain of witnessing others possess that joy becomes intolerable to the ego.
So seeing someone else happy just hurts too much.
Exactly. To neutralize this pain, the unconscious mind devalues the source of the desire. By burning the couple, the dreamer is enacting a defense mechanism called isolation of affect.
Isolation of affect.
Yes. They are aggressively separating the emotional longing from the concept of intimacy, effectively declaring, connection isn't real and I don't want it anyway.
Oh man, that perfectly explains the human powder. They literally pulverize the concept of human connection into dust.
They reduce it to nothing.
Yeah, they strip it of all its warmth and humanity, reducing it to a meaningless video game resource that you can just hoard in your inventory. Because if human connection is just powder, it doesn't hurt when you don't have any real relationships in your waking life.
Exactly. You devalue what you believe you cannot have. However, dissociation and devaluation are merely temporary patches. They are not cures.
They don't actually fix the root problem.
No, they don't. A mind can retreat into a third-person video game perspective, and it can reduce the agonizing desire for love into human powder. But the underlying anxiety remains unprocessed. Eventually, the psychological defenses buckle under the pressure.
And in this dream, the repressed anxiety finally breaches the containment walls.
In a very physical way.
Right. The breach happens incredibly violently. The video game world suddenly turns hostile. Arrows and spears begin flying at the tiny soldier from all directions.
The environment turns against them.
Yeah. And in a panic, the dreamer tries to maneuver their avatar using a tiny video game controller stick. But every single time they push the stick, every microscopic movement generates the physical sensation of a razor blade slicing the skin right off their fingers.
Ouch. That is highly specific and deeply alarming.
It's awful. The physical pain in the dream becomes so blinding, so intensely real, that it forces the dreamer to wake up in a cold sweat thinking, I can't take this anymore.
When a dream manifests actual somatic physical pain, it indicates a critical system overload.
So it's not just a bad dream anymore.
No, the boundary between the abstract psychological realm and the physical nervous system has collapsed. The brain's threat detection center, the amygdala, is reacting to the symbolic threat with a genuine physiological stress response.
It's literally hurting the body.
Yes. Let's analyze the mechanics of the imagery. Fingers and hands are our primary evolutionary tools for agency. They're the mechanisms through which we manipulate our environment and impose our will on the world.
So the razor blade pain associated with moving the fingers implies that in waking life, the simple act of trying to make a choice or taking any action at all is causing the dreamer immense psychological agony.
Exactly right. And the flying spears represent the external societal criticisms and demands we identified in the real estate pitch. Navigating those demands has become so emotionally intolerable that every attempt to move forward emotionally flays them alive.
The choice of the controller is just devastatingly ironic here, too. I mean, a controller is literally designed to give a player command over their environment.
But here it does the opposite.
Right. In this scenario, the very tool designed to provide control is what's mutilating them. It operates as the ultimate symbol of a total loss of autonomy. The dreamer realizes they have zero control over their trajectory.
It is a terrifying realization.
And waking up at that exact moment of intense physical pain wasn't just the end of a nightmare. It was a physiological emergency reboot. The nervous system was redlining, and the brain had to pull the plug to prevent a total collapse.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this somatic manifestation of pain is a desperate communication from the unconscious.
It's screaming at them to stop.
Yes, it is attempting to inform the dreamer that they are absorbing massive amounts of invisible damage trying to navigate these societal expectations. The physical pain is not a malfunction of the dream state. It is a feature. It is a demand that the waking self acknowledge its own suffering and cease forcing itself into environments that require it to wear flimsy armor while riding a monster.
But, you know, the tragedy of the wake-up is that right before the violent video game transition, right before the trauma and the razors, the dream actually offered a fleeting glimpse of the antidote.
It showed them a way out.
Yeah, it showed the dreamer exactly what their mind needed to heal, but the dreamer couldn't accept it.
This occurred back in the art classroom, correct?
Yes, exactly. Tucked away in a corner of that creepy, soot-covered room, the dreamer is playing a simple game of table tennis with an old classmate.
A very stark contrast to everything else.
Totally. It's just a back-and-forth rally. Both of them feel like they lack individuality, but they are just hitting the ball. It's rhythmic. It's an equal exchange. But then, out of nowhere, a teacher yells, "Shut up!" at them.
Ah, the interruption.
Right, and standing nearby, a female senior colleague just looks down at the dreamer and sighs in profound disappointment.
The mechanics of the ping pong rally represent the absolute antithesis of the real estate pitch. Table tennis, in this context, symbolizes the true, unpretentious human desire for equal, pressure-free communication.
Just playing for the sake of playing.
Exactly. There is no grand corporate presentation to deliver, no impossibly complex classical art to measure up to, and no aggressive dragon to ride.
Yeah.
It is a simple reciprocal connection. That rhythmic exchange is what the dreamer's core self truly requires for stabilization.
But they sabotage their own cure. The teacher yelling and the colleague sighing are not external forces, they are internal mechanisms.
Yes, they are generated by the dreamer's own mind.
In Freudian terms, this is the superego stepping in, right?
Yeah.
The internalized critical voice of society.
That is exactly what it is.
The part of the mind that says, you shouldn't be playing ping pong in the corner. You should be building your brand. You should be producing value. You are wasting time. The dreamer is effectively bullying themselves, feeling intense self-disgust for simply enjoying a small, non-productive moment of peace.
What's fascinating here is how clearly the unconscious maps out both the pathology and the potential healing.
It's like a complete diagnostic chart.
It really is. The pathology is the overwhelming demand from the superego to be a hyper-functional, highly individualized product for society's consumption. The healing is found in the rally.
The ping pong game.
Right. The dream is arguing that true individuality is not achieved by forcing grand achievements or faking enthusiasm in a corporate pitch. It is achieved by quieting the internal critic, accepting the messy, contradictory emotions of the self, and allowing oneself the warmth of a simple, unjudged connection.
Looking at the entire architecture of this dream, it's an incredible psychological journey. We moved from the suffocating societal pressures of the real estate pitch, where the self is forced to sell out using meaningless metrics.
Then down into the unconscious.
Right, descending into the neglected, soot-covered insecurities of the art room, confronting the terror of feeling empty. And then we witnessed the mind fracture into dissociation, riding the raw aggression of the id through a video game, literally pulverizing intimacy into dust, just to survive the fear of isolation.
A very heavy sequence of defenses.
Yeah, and it all culminates in the realization that the mind will physically shock the body awake with pain before it lets us continue destroying ourselves with internalized guilt.
This specific dream architecture maps closely onto the waking realities of many individuals navigating high-pressure modern environments.
Oh, I believe it.
The continuous demand to perform functional utility forces the authentic self into the shadows, where it is left with no alternative but to communicate through anxiety, burnout, or vivid, agonizing dreams. The mind is incredibly resilient, but it requires the conscious ego to actually listen to its signals and decode its metaphors.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening to this right now? If you are experiencing these kinds of intense, exhausting stress dreams, or if you feel that metaphorical razor blade pain of anxiety every time you try to make a decision in your career, recognize that this pain is not a weakness.
It is not a failure on your part.
Exactly. It is absolute proof that deep down, your unconscious mind is actively fighting for you. It is fighting to navigate a complex, demanding world, and it is begging you to pay attention to your own boundaries before the system overloads entirely.
When we start viewing these internal conflicts as malfunctions and begin interpreting them as diagnostic tools, we can start to dismantle the flimsy limitum armor. We can stop riding the monsters we've created and start engaging with the world with a sense of genuine agency.
You don't have to sell the house with fake numbers. You don't have to ride the dragon. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do for your own mind is just allow yourself to play a little ping pong in the corner.
Just hit the ball back and forth.
But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today, building on one of the darkest, most revealing mechanisms we unpacked. We explored how the unconscious mind is willing to literally devalue human connection, turning a happy couple into human powder just to protect the ego from the agonizing pain of rejection or isolation.
A powerful defense, but a tragic one.
Yeah. So look at your own life and ask yourself what waking life items like money, status, or being relentlessly, exhaustingly busy are you hoarding in your inventory right now, just to convince yourself you don't actually need other people. Think about it. Because the things we collect to make ourselves feel safe are usually just monuments to what we're most afraid of losing.